Good afternoon, Scott Baker. I got to tell you, I'm excited about this one.
Oh, okay. The title of it is Managing the Anxious Attachment Style, which
Yes.
is an odd topic for our Lead Better topic, and it's
Yeah,
an odd field note. It's odd for admired leadership to be going into something that seems so psychological.
right.
So, what's pulling you in on this one?
Well, uh, I just am very excited to hear attachment styles discussed because my wife and I, in particular, have a lot of experience with a certain kind of attachment style that is being lived out in our home by
Okay.
our two youngest because of
Yes.
various things that have happened in their life when they were young. And so, anxious attachment style is a new one to me. And so it opened up the world to all these attachment styles that I did not realize. Now, I
Sure.
need to calm down because this psychological approach to leadership development is not what we're doing, right? And usually this is what happens, right? People love to talk about the differences and the differences that they have with everybody else. And based on their differences, this is how exactly you need it. And we don't take that approach to leadership development, but I have to admit, it's intoxicating. It is so fun to talk about your difference. It's fun to think of myself as an individual. It's very different than you, very different from my wife, very different from anyone else in my family. This is who I am, and this is how you need to lead me if you're going to say anything to me. This is how you need to teach me. If you're going to communicate love to me, it needs to be done in a certain kind of way, right? And now that we've got attachment styles is another one, it's like, oh, this is fantastic. So again, calm down. At our core, we are not looking for all the differences. We are looking for the in common behaviors of
Yes.
admired leaders and what they do in certain situations and why it becomes so effective for them. Awareness of attachment styles, it's not bad. I like it, right? I just
Yeah.
need to not be so excited about it.
Okay, and I'm glad you're excited because I don't think that I'm as knowledgeable as you, although I think I've read at least one book, and I'll describe that, about attachment styles. And I'm just going to add a little bit of an addendum to your setup here on the admired leadership approach, which we actually talked about recently when we kind of got into similar territory on a less provocatively titled field note, my recollection, which is it's not that in our behavioral approach to leadership we're saying that the psychological doesn't matter. Our founders often said, knowing yourself, understanding the psychology, even of your team,
Right.
that could be requisite, but it's not sufficient, right?
Right.
So that requisite but not sufficient sort of scenario framework, I think, applies here, which is, yes, the problem is for most leaders, and this would happen if you were being dependent on attachment styles, Myers-Briggs, if you want to attach an Enneagram number to anybody,
Right.
you've got all this, and all of a sudden, whether you have 5 people on your team or 50 or you have 11 direct reports, if you've got 11 people and you're going to have this chart that says, well, they're a 9-wing this and a that, and then they've got these letters, and all, well, then you're like, I'm stuck. Like, I don't even know where to go with this because it literally is like juggling 11 balls and you're going to drop stuff.
Right.
So the better leaders that we watch understand that people are very, very different, but they
Yes.
do look for those universals.
Yes.
So this is but it doesn't mean that there aren't cases where some of those differences can disrupt the larger team. And I think that's where this field
absolutely.
note comes in, which is
And we've all
when
felt
you
it.
do that, yes.
Yeah.
What does a leader do when that is presenting itself? Now, with that setup, give me a sense of what we need to know about the attachment style, this anxious attachment style, and then we can sort of go with where to figure this out.
Okay. Well, the theory is based on the idea that as humans, in your first 6 months of being alive, first 18 months, especially 6 to 18 months, in most cases, your mom, your caregiver, your interaction with them, your cooing, a baby cries and knows that it can get picked up, right? That whole interaction is making connections in a human's brain, in a young child's brain, to let them know that something bigger than me is in the world, right? And, oh, this is what parents are. Oh, this is what relationships are. And so just the the initial building blocks of that as a child are something that become entrenched in the way that you live and think about relationships and how those attachments kind of sink into your soul, right? And whether or
Okay.
not you're overly attached or under attached can actually cause some, what we call healthy human beings, or can be like disorderly in the way that
Okay.
you go throughout your life. And so one that we're dealing with in our house is called reactive attachment disorder, because they had none of that cooing, none
Right.
of that attention at all.
Yeah.
And so in
and
reactive,
yours is a unique circumstance without getting into it. You have
Right.
you have a large number of kids, and you have all kinds of different scenarios, and
Right.
so you're not coming at that without a perspective that is patient and has experience, but it's unique.
yes, but when you meet someone in the aisle of the grocery store and they interact with you in such a way where you're like, that was really odd behavior. Some of it is due to this trauma that they suffered as a child, even before that they can remember. And when you are dealing with the person in the hallway of your organization, you think to yourselves, because of the interaction that they had, man, that person is really needy. Like,
For sure, right.
I can't walk past them without them fishing for a compliment about everything, right?
right.
So instead of just dismissing them with this word needy, it is interesting to understand where it is that comes from, right? And as you understand where it comes from, there are some behavioral cues that you can do with some of these attachment
Right.
styles. This one in particular that we're talking about in the field note today, that there's a way that kind of sets the tone for you, sets the tone for your organization, and sets
Yeah.
the tone for the person. Not that you're a psychologist, not that you're a behavioral therapist,
Right.
but this is probably the way that you ought to do, instead of just writing them off as needy people.
Yeah. Now, one of the unusual things about this particular field note, it got a big reaction today. In fact, we talked with Randall about it earlier today, and he said that even from a lot of high-level folks that he's been dealing with, they're like, yeah, I have those people in my organization. It actually made everybody that read it say, oh, that's what's going on, right? So
Right.
everybody does know that this is a thing. Now, I don't know if this doesn't probably exactly parallel what you're describing, but I remember I was living in a city, and I was dealing with a woman who was involved in public relations for one of the organizations, and she had an Asian background. It might have been Korean, and at some point we were talking, and we were at a dinner, and there was something I can't remember. It was like innocuous, like we were having chicken. She goes, "Oh, I don't have chicken." I said, "Oh, you don't like chicken? Are you a vegetarian?" She goes, "No, I just don't like birds of any kind." And I said, "Huh? Well, really, none?"
Yeah, and in that moment, you think to yourself, this could be a very interesting back and forth, or I might be prying open
and
something.
indeed it was.
Yeah.
So I was not prepared fully for her answer. She said, well, I was adopted. I was raised as an adopted child. But when they found me before the orphanage took me in, when I was a newborn, I was in a chicken coop. And it's believed that for the first couple of days or maybe even weeks of my life, I was actually kept warm by the chickens. Now, you could imagine that might make you love birds, or it
Right.
could have terrified you.
Sure,
right?
sure, yeah.
And so I was like, huh, I have never heard anything like that
Was
before.
there any part of your brain thinking there's a punchline that might
No,
be
yeah,
coming?
no,
So
she was very serious. There was
Okay.
there was nothing like that at all. She was very serious telling me this. So in any case, that's it. Now, I will say, I encountered this, and I know we only have a couple of minutes, and I want you to apply it since you know most about it. The attachment style, comes out of John Bowlby's work, and I was listening to Shane Parrish's podcast a couple of years ago. In fact, many people who have come to Admired Leadership, it's because of a 2020 interview that year with Randall Stutman, and you can go look for that Shane did, that brought many people to the Admired Leadership content that were unaware of it for the past 30 years. And so as I got to know Shane and was listening more often, he interviewed a psychologist, psychotherapist named Sue Johnson, who I believe died like a year ago. And she wrote a book called Hold Me Close. And Shane was just talking about how important this book was. And so I read the book, and it was around John Bowlby's attachment style. Now later, I knew somebody that was working with a guy that was an expert in attachment style, and they had these courses online. And I just always had that thing where I was like, okay, I get that. I'm just not sure where to go. Maybe in your dating life or your romantic life, you'd want to understand this. I just never understood how this would apply in a work or an organizational circumstance. And so I think that's where I was curious, even in knowing that we would be talking about this, where this would go in terms of, well, what do I do? Like, where do I go behaviorally to deal with a psychological issue?
Right. And I think many leaders might mistake their role as one that, well, if it's this extreme where someone needs emotional support for almost any decision that they make, and then the results of those decisions or the results of their performance are something that they're constantly coming back and asking for, not just regular feedback on the work itself, but feedback on like, are you and I still good? Right?
Yes, right.
And that's usually the feedback that they seek is like, please assure me that we're still friends, right? Please.
Yep, right.
And that level of insecurity is something that when you are going into a situation with someone like that, you feel like, well, if I just prove to them that they are okay, right? And that they do have the relationship, eventually they'll stop. And it doesn't work.
It doesn't happen. So in the field note, we talk about this idea that this is where that famous phrase comes, high maintenance. So the people that have, if you have somebody on your team and maybe this was their issue, you can be deeply empathetic to whatever circumstance it was that they were raised in, or whatever kind of family or situation occurred for them. But it is likely to be not pacified by increased attention. That's what the field note is saying. So it's saying that good leaders will establish a pattern, a rhythm of communication, but they're not going to overdo it. And they actually try to set some boundaries or some ground rules around that to say in a way, and the field note notes this, it can sound cruel.
Yes.
Right? But it's actually necessary in a way. Do you agree with that?
Well, I know my mom had a rule with a church lady back when we were growing up that she told to me, my rule for her is that I never say more than 3 lines. And as a kid hearing that, I was like, it's like, but she had like a 3-sentence rule with this lady. And then she would like the second sentence always was some kind of a speed up cue. And the third one always had like a see you later kind of attached to it. And
speed up cue is an admired leadership line that we use sometimes. Yeah.
Right. So, but that's as a kid hearing my mom say that for the first time, that she had a 3-sentence rule, and they laughed about it when they said it. I thought exactly what you said. Oh, that sounds cruel, right? Why would you? Right. Until this person turned their attentions on me as a kid, right? And as a 14-year-old, I thought it was great. She thinks that I hung the moon, right? And she can't. And then it wasn't until I got older that I realized, oh, there's real value in that rule. And it wasn't about being mean, right? And it wasn't just my mom's boundary. In a lot of ways, this lady needed that in order for her to recognize what was. And so, and those boundaries and the way they show up in the office are not just in like only say 3 sentences to the person in the hallway. That might be one of them. But if they're a direct report of yours who actually needs feedback about their work, the trick is that you not make the feedback come from an emotional center, right?
Okay.
This person actually needs like very clear, this is what you do, this is how you do it, and go ahead and do it. And then the feedback as to whether or not they did a good job or whether or not they should be patted on the head, it shows up in the checklist, right? So in a lot of ways, you distance yourself from them. You're not the one who is emotionally supplying the feedback that they need, but you can, in a distance way, say, did you do your tasks? Did you do them on time? Are they all completed? Well, that means you did a good job, right? And then that being repeated over and over again doesn't necessarily wear you out as like trying to figure out all kinds of new emotional tactics to use, but allows you. And in many ways, there's probably plenty of people who could benefit from that kind of approach.
Sure, yeah.
Who aren't going to immediately take advantage of the fact that it feels like, oh, my leader's opening up to me. That must mean we're best friends, right?
Right. All right. Well, that's helpful, and we went a minute or two long here, but this was a complicated topic. And at least from my perspective, I thought that Sue Johnson's book, Hold Me Tight, was a decent explanation of attachment theory. It's more around her sort of therapeutic style, but it's probably not a bad way to get into it.
No,
Maybe it'll
I
solve
would
all
like
of
to
your
think that
problems.
books like that are still, things that you can pull behaviors out of. And that's
Oh, yeah,
that's
for
really,
sure.
right.
Great.
So,
All right. Thanks,
fantastic.
Mikey. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Bye now.